everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Sunday Drive. I'm so glad you guys could join me today, but before we get into the main topic of today's video, I need to apologize to you guys. I made a promise that last week I would upload videos during the week, but I got so caught up in filming and editing that I was not able to. However, the good news is that I have a bunch of videos filmed and currently in the process of editing. So this next coming week, you can expect another episode of the Getting the M3 Up to Snuff series on Wednesday and another video on Friday, which is a surprise. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the main topic of today's video. And that is going to be 5 cars that I considered over the E36 M3 when I was looking at cars. So 2 years ago, when I was looking at cars, the car market looked a little bit different, you could say, than the way it does today. A lot of things were a lot cheaper. So keep that in mind when I'm kind of talking about these cars. But to get into the list, number 1, or I guess the 5, not really in any particular order, is going to be an E39/E34 540i. So the 540i 6-speed, by the way. The 540i was a car that I really looked at and I think I would have really liked because A, it's very good on the highway, which I do a lot of highway driving in this car. And B, it just has like a sense of, I don't know, like smoothness about it. So I have driven an E39 540i before, and the way it drives, it's similar in speed to this car. Maybe as you get a little faster, it's a little quicker. But the way it builds torque, it's not like an S52. It doesn't like scream and peak way up top and like it doesn't do that. It's a very like, you just kind of, as you get up to like 5,000 ish, you just kind of hear the faintest sound of like a V8. But then you look at the speedo and you're going really fast. And to me, that is such a cool experience. Like I don't know, I love that. E34s, I've sat in them before. I've never actually driven one. I'd love to drive one, especially an M5. I think they sound incredible. But I kind of just assumed with the 540i that it would drive the same as an E39, but I get it in an E34 package, which is a little bit more mechanical than E39, so I've been told. And it has kind of that more 90s look, which I'm more of a fan of. But that car, I think I would have liked that car a lot. 6 gears, especially, this only has 5. 6 gears would have been very nice on the highway. But I didn't ultimately end up buying it because I was afraid of the V8 maintenance on those cars, especially the E39 with timing chains. If you get into most of the cars, I think the early ones you need to replace them. And then E34s were just hard to find in general, because this is before prices shot up, so you didn't see them for sale. And when you did see them for sale, they were gone instantly because they were too cheap. That's just all there was to that. So number 2 on the list is going to be an E46 M3. So you might be asking yourself, especially like, hey, why wouldn't you buy an E46 M3? That's a better car. So I wasn't really looking at E46 M3s. One just kind of happened upon me. It was a silver on red car, which was really cool, but it was an SMG. Now, I had never driven an SMG before, so I was open to the idea. It was 10 grand, the car, but it was a sorted SMG, because that's something people ask, like the SMG pump, whatever, all the hydraulics, whatever. It had new SMG pump, all the lines, everything, new fluid. He did all of it. So it would have been actually reliable SMG. The clutch wasn't done, but the SMGs tend to treat clutches better than people driving a stick do, because the computer is better than you are. And the guy also knew how to drive the SMG car properly to ensure the life of the parts. So I wasn't actually concerned about the reliability aspect of the SMG. But when I finally went out and drove it, there were a couple problems I had with that car. One is it was borderline straight piped and it was very loud. And you can fix that, but I didn't really want to deal with it. And then also, I did drive the SMG, and I was not overly huge fan. I will say, wow, that patch of road sucks. I will say, I do not hate the SMG gearbox in and of itself. A lot of people like hate it, think it's the worst thing ever. I don't think it's that bad, actually. I think first of all, you can't drive in automatic mode. It's still a manual. Drive it like a manual. Use the paddles, whatever, or use the little gear stick you get. But I think it's kind of a fun transmission, especially like it takes a second to shift sometimes, even in the faster shift settings. But kind of waiting for it, and it goes, and then it like kicks you back in your seat. That's actually kind of fun. But overall, I just wasn't in love with the car. The thing is, the E46, it's a much better car than the E36, that is for sure. But it lacked the mechanical visceral feel that I was looking for. And the SMG didn't really help it a lot. It didn't need things as well. It came with a lot of parts. It needed a valve adjustment. It needed the subframe reinforcements done. Any other things. It came with all those things, but that was stuff I was going to have to go and do. And I just didn't really feel like dealing with it, because it's also not really stuff I could have done myself at the time or even do now. And then you could ask, why didn't I look at other ones? The truth is, E46 M3s were just too expensive for me in my budget. To get a nice one, I would have needed 15 grand at the time. I had like just 10, and really that wasn't gonna cut it. And I didn't want to overextend myself and then buy a crappy car and have it break. So next on my list, we have an E39 M5. So again, kind of like the E46 M3, I wasn't looking for one, but one happened upon me. This car, because I could not afford an M5. I still can't. I couldn't then. That's just the truth. But one happened upon me. It was black on black, 99, so very early car, or maybe it was a 2000. It had the black gauge cluster, so do with that what you will. But it was a full option car, had navigation, had everything. And it was pretty cool. $6,000. And it had also rod bearings were done. Or no, sorry, rod bearings were not done. Vanos is done, timing chains were done, all the suspension, the brakes, everything was done, but there was one issue. It had carbon buildup, and the rod bearings were not done. That was what it was. So it had carbon buildup, and that in and of itself is like a $3,000 job on an M5, because you gotta pull the top end apart, essentially. I'm not sure exactly on the job, so excuse me if I'm not totally sure, but anyway, so it had carbon buildup, and I'll be honest, I never went out to go look at this car. I should have, just to get the experience of driving an M5, but it got to the point, honestly, where it also had some rust. It wasn't like bad Michigan rust, but it definitely had some starting that would have need to have been addressed. But it ultimately came down to, I didn't want to waste the guy's time, and I knew that if I bought that M5, I would have been too nervous while owning it of potential maintenance, and I would have been too nervous to drive it, put miles on it, because everything on an M5 is expensive. You're buying a car that costs $100,000 in today's money, and I knew that, and I was smart enough to look, I'm not ready for this. Now, I could maintain that car. Like, I would be confident in myself doing it, but then I didn't have the experience I do now and could not have managed that for myself. So that's why I didn't buy an M5. I would still love to drive an M5 and give like my honest driving impressions of it, because I think the E39 chassis is it's tied between that E34 and E28. I really can't figure out which one I like better. I would need to put all of them side to side and figure it out for myself, but that's a different topic. That's why I didn't buy an M5. I think it would have been cool, but didn't end up working out. So number 4 on my list, was an Evo I WRX STI. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Subaru model designations, the Evo I is the new one. So it was a 2016 WRX STI with a 6-speed manual. Now this car, you're thinking, whoa, that is way out of your budget. And you're right, it was. I could not afford this car. But one day I was with my mother and we were at a used car dealer parking lot, and she was looking for a car, and I looked at this STI and I was like, man, that thing's pretty cool. It was blue on black, favorite color, 6-speed manual. It was really cool, and I was just kind of looking at it. She saw me looking at it, and she also knew I wanted a BMW, or an old one, and she gave me the choice of she would have bought that car for me. She offered to buy me this 2016 WRX for like $25,000. But the trade-off was I had to take all the money I had now, save it, and I could not buy, I had to keep that car through all of college. So no BMW. Which for me, I wasn't like super set on a BMW, but like basically it was kind of the assumption like I have to keep it, no buying any old like crap box, right? And I didn't take her up on it for two reasons. One, I kind of felt bad about taking that much money from her to use on a car because I was like 17. But also, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to learn how to work on something. I wanted something that was like mine. I bought it. And that wasn't going to be it for me. That car would have been kind of, again, more like a loaner car, I guess. Like, I didn't pay for it, whatever. So I ended up buying one of those cars. That car would have been really cool to have. I think that car would have been really fun, actually. I still have yet to drive an STI to this day. But I've been around them. They're cool. They're fun. And for my friends, that has definitely been, to them at least, one of the biggest mistakes that I personally have ever made. I mean, kind of right. Probably should have taken it, but I didn't, and here we are. Not disappointed that I didn't take it. So moving on to the last one. This is the one that got away. This was, on this list, the car that I came the closest to like buying. I didn't test drive this car, but I was like ready to go out to this guy's house like the next day and go buy it. And that was a Volkswagen Corrado. So for those of you who know Volkswagens and the Volkswagen market, the Volkswagen Corrado is like the holy grail of all 90s Volkswagens. Really a lot of Volkswagens. I mean, 2000s, the R32, and the 80s, it gets a little more hazy. But of the 90s, the Corrado is the holy grail, and it is like, I joke, like it is every VW guy's wet dream. Everyone wants a Corrado or an R32, but Corrado for me was one of my dream cars since a kid. I've never driven one, I've never been in one, but it's just a car that I just like looking at. And I have been around VR6s, and I like that. I imagine they drive the same. For those of you who played Forza Horizon 1 as a kid, the starter car in that game was a red Volkswagen Corrado. And that thing was cool. It was like whoa, because that game was also cool. So it kind of like instilled this almost sense of nostalgia in my mind for that game. Just into liking Corrados, I guess. But this Corrado came up for sale, and it was only $5,500. Everything was replaced, literally everything, just shy of like an engine and trans rebuild. Timing chains, all the gaskets, clutch, flywheel, cooling system, everything. Suspension, it was all done. The car had like 210,000 miles, something like that. It was red on tan, so it was also red. I mean, that's why I was like, oh my god, I gotta buy this car. $5,500, and I messaged the guy. I was like, hey, because I saw it up, it had been up for a day, and I messaged him. I was like, hey, I'll come over tomorrow and look at it. And he's like, sorry, I already got an interested buyer today, and that guy ended up buying it. So I didn't get a chance to buy that car, even look at it, which was very disappointing to me. That was definitely, that was the one that got away. Looking back, I'm happy with how everything turned out, but I think it would have been, you know, just kind of cool to think about how my car purchasing could have gone differently had I bought a Corrado. To this day, the Volkswagen Corrado remains one of my bucket list cars. I really want to drive a Corrado. A Mark III Jetta or Golf would be similar enough. I have driven a Mark III Jetta before, but that's a different story. I didn't drive it very long. It doesn't really count. But I would love to get up close to a Corrado and drive it. That would be like a childhood dream come true for me. Definitely someday I'm gonna own one of those cars, because now that $5,500 car is probably $10,000, maybe even more. And Corrados, for me, I can't justify it because Corrados are so weird. Their parts are hard to find. That God forbid that spoiler quits working or your sunroof gets stuck open, you are screwed on a Corrado because you cannot find any of the parts anywhere because they're all Corrado specific. Which is why I might opt for something like a Jetta or a Golf. Oh, okay, that's snow. But with that said, those are the 5 cars that I looked at over E36 M3s. You guys can tell me down below if I made the right choice. What cars have you guys looked at instead of E36 M3s? Did you buy them? Were you convinced out of an E36, or did you still buy an E36? So with that, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.